Hey everyone, Master versus Many continues here. It looks like the world has played the move A5, which makes sense. As we flip over to our analysis board, the truth is if black doesn't play A5 in a lot of these Sicilian pawn structures, white's immediate intention is to separate the A6 pawn from the B4 pawn. So if black was, for example, to castle, you might see this positional move here that at first sight seems harmless, but in the bigger picture of the position, both A6 and B4 can be weaknesses potentially, especially the B4 pawn. Also, in this particular Sicilian, you might see the B6 square be used by the bishop eventually if that knight's not there. So very good understanding of this position, very good awareness of what you want to do in the queen side. On the queen side as far as the pawn structure goes. So this is a really good tip for everyone to go ahead and just tuck in their pocket and use for later. Whether you play the Sicilian or against the Sicilian, it's one of the potential drawbacks anytime you play the early queen side pawn extension lines of a Sicilian in terms of dealing with the A4 move. So it's whether you're playing the Sicilian again or playing against it, very good stuff to be aware of. And so with the move A5, I now have to figure out what is my approach going to be now that there aren't really there isn't really the same potential for positional weaknesses over there on the queen side as there were before. Now what's become open is the B5 square. So one of the things you're going to consider is the move C3 with the idea of either taking once again and hopefully making a target for yourself to work on later. Or after they take and you take, you might have the intention of using the B5 square for the knight, the E3 square for the bishop, and if you can get the C file working for the rook, you might have the potential for all your pieces to work together over there, create some targets. The issue is the position is for sure going to be double-edged no matter what at this point. I think that black has already shown that he can get counterplay on the king side. We know H4 is coming. We also know that this knight can put itself on C5 and this rook can come to C8, which just means that black has just as much potential to challenge white's ideas on the queen side as I do regarding the moves I just laid out, knight B5, bishop E3, rook C1. So it's kind of frustrating. Again, we know I'm a little bit perturbed with the position I have here, forgetting the best line that I was meaning to play earlier in this variation of the 6H3 knight rook, but you can back up and check up other videos here on the YouTube channel. So one thing I'm considering is whether or not C4 is an idea. The point is that if they take it, I take back, and we're right back in the same kind of dynamic I was just describing. I think the position is roughly equal. I know that I would still have the potential to outplay my opponent on the queen side. I do have a 2-on-1, even with the B pawn being backward. And maybe I can get him to make, meaning the world, him, not him, her, or whatever, or everyone. Maybe I can get all of you to misplay something on the king side and maybe leave me with some access into some of these squares. But C4 is a way to sort of call out black's plan if they don't want to en passant. I might be able to play B3 and kind of keep the whole queen side in lockdown mode so that I might bring the pieces to the other side of the board. It also makes this bishop feel a little bit out of sorts if the pawn structure stays that way. The thing that I worry about it is that at some point the B3 pawn might not be the easiest thing to guard. I don't know. I would bet if I played C4 that the world would take en passant because most people like doing things that they don't get to do that often. Don't lie to yourself. You love taking en passant whenever you have a chance. But if they didn't, would I really be proud of the move C4 as far as my future ideas in the position? I guess it's probably six or half a dozen, one or the other, right? 6 and 1. Does that phrase even make sense? 6 and 1, baker's dozen. How does that? I mean, what are we talking about? A stitch in time killed the cat. Anyway, I digress. All right, we're back on task here. So, other than C3 and C4 and reacting to black's solid move to hold his queenside pawns together, are there any other ideas here? F4 just seems really too risky and not enough reward involved in it. King H2 is an interesting, flexible move. Tuck the king away, and one of the thoughts I had behind the whole rook E1 idea was that if I played King H2 and I could bring the knight from G1 to F3, I might I might what? Where would I even go from there? I don't know. Well, I might have more potential of maneuvering my pieces around. More potential than the knight does on e2, but it just feels really slow. The other move, of course, is b3 to consider, with maybe goals of bishop to b2 and try to make f4 a little more effective once the bishop is on that diagonal. But I worry about some positions like this where, you know, they sort of just gang up on the c file, and I have to then deal with that with some pieces that maybe aren't ideally placed. But one interesting point is it really going to be possible for black to prevent c4 down the road, where I can sort of get the same structure as I'm talking about getting if I just go for it immediately? And my guess is no. It's one of the things I like about b3. Is it's kind of a solid move in that from that perspective, and it is a little flexible. If I decide I don't want to play for c3 or c4 right away and play bishop to b2, you know, like if something like this is played and they don't go queen c7, you might see queen to d2 and maybe then rook c1. The pawn on b3 also guards the c4 square, which is useful from that knight coming to b6. So b3 seems like a move that has some perks, but I feel like there's probably something I'm misunderstanding about the position as far as how quickly black is going to bring pressure to the queen side. But this is probably about as meaty as we've gone into both the analysis and my own calculation process in this Master versus Many video series to this point. So hopefully that's appreciated and useful. I guess that was the whole idea of the experiment. So if people think that going deeper into the position isn't as fun as the shorter videos, then I guess the experiment failed. So I still like the idea of c3 and c4 because I feel like I know it's typical. It's familiar for me to try to undermine the pawns and get access to these squares, but I just don't feel very impressed with my potential there as I might in some other Sicilians where black expanded the queenside pawn structure early. So let's say I go b3 again. One of the other interesting points is if h4 and g4, bishop g5 is played, I can avoid the trade of the bishops by going here. Now, not to say that black doesn't have advantages from that perspective too. The bishop is on the dark square diagonal, but that might work, you know. And if they go this way, and if you play c4 now and sort of en passant trade, I don't think the c2 pawn is going to become a huge target. Is this position anything more than dynamic? I mean, really, it's not necessarily better for white, but the more I look at it, the more I do like the flexibility that b3 offers. Honestly, I like the idea of getting the bishop here, avoiding the dark square bishop trade. And yes, I have the potential to play c3 or c4 and eliminate my backward c-pawn. But if I'm able to get enough counterplay in other areas of the board, maybe I won't have to go for that. What if I go there and they play rook c8 and I go here and they play here and then I have to play rook... No, if I play rook c1, bishop g5 might be irritating. Although bishop g5 before getting castled might run into something like this, right? And now we have a mess. So I'm not sure that black would go for that. But even if I decided it wasn't worth the risk, I could still play here, I guess, and my knight would be able to come to b5 with tempo. So that makes me feel better about the concrete potential problems with b3, which is something you should take into your own games. If you're getting committed to a position and you're starting to like the strategical, the positional aspects of the plan that you're choosing, it's really important to not fall in love with that and make sure that you're calculating all the most direct, concrete ways your opponent might approach it, the ones that make you squirm a little bit, make you uncomfortable. So let's see. If b3, if h4, g4, bishop g5, again, f4 is an interesting point whenever they're not castled yet. So, you know, they may have to go for this and then get castled before they can really consider other plans. When, again, bishop to b2 is interesting, as well as this move king h2, because bishop g5, I might have knight to g1 heading into f3. But the thing that worries me about a bunch of the black options in this line is at some point f5 coming in. And now they're getting counterplay on the king side, and I don't know that I have any real advantages to my position to compensate for that. So this idea is definitely interesting. h4, g4, and then castles. So one idea for me is to just follow through with with the plan of bishop to b2, and on f5 meet it with the dynamic option of just capturing, opening up my own king, but trying to use some of the squares. I get the feeling that if I was playing a computer, I would get crushed in this position with the exposed king. But I'm not playing a computer. I'm playing a whole bunch of human beings. It's tough. It's tough to make this decision. I don't really know that I'm in the best... I have the best setup to deal with a plan of h4, g4, and f5 anyway, regardless of what I do here. So maybe that's why you end up coming back to ideas like c3, takes, knight, is because you just feel like at least the counterplay moves a little more quickly, right? And sort of distracts black from the plans over there on the king side. And that kind of makes sense, because honestly, the more I look at this line, the more I'm not thrilled about it. Unless I could justify something with f4, but wouldn't f5 still be an option? And now things are really blowing open, right? Yeah, and I don't feel like taking and getting a knight into one of these critical squares is good enough for me not to feel really worried about my own open king. Plus, they don't even threat anything. I mean, because you could just take here, because if knight e6, you have check, right? Oh no, I have bishop e3. Okay, so that's an interesting point, is f4 really an opportunity, really an option for white? If I could get f5, I might like it, right? Now we got a closed position where the king is going to be able to hide behind some of the pawns. If the pawn is captured, I can take with the knight or the bishop. Seems definitely more dynamic than any other option, as far as like I'm preventing f5 here, tactically, not trying to prevent it strategically or with counterplay, but just bringing the noise to that side of the board. That's interesting, actually. h4, b3, g4, castles, f4. And what will the chess.com members do? What will the world do? If takes, I can also take with the bishop, honestly, and then kind of, like just make some sort of move. But I can tuck away the king, and even on knight e5, knight d4, queen up, king over. Maybe knight takes g4 here in some positions. Yeah, that might be a problem. Oops, with all kinds of wacky business happening. So I have to be careful with knight to d4. I would have to play some other move first. Queen to b6. Starting to look like black is getting a little bit of an edge, right? Although, could be a mess, right? You get things like this, and then knight to d4, and could be a real mess. b3 doesn't feel exceptionally useful in a lot of those positions, but it still does guard c4. And this is sort of me being kind of pot committed to the whole line with h4 and then f4, which is interesting. I don't think there's a lot of games left in this line. So as far as all the members trying to look up games, which is a legal resource, the only thing that is illegal is engine analysis. As far as looking up games, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of information to pull from as the members try to vote on a move here. So this idea of b3, I don't know that it's really been beaten back before. So it might be worth a try from that perspective. Okay, I've obviously invested some time in it. Maybe let's go for it. I understand there's risk. The risk is what? If I end up being wrong with this move b3, where am I going to be outplayed? I'm going to be outplayed on the dark squares. I'm going to be outplayed with the strike of f5 at some point and my king becoming exposed. And I'm probably going to be outplayed on the c file where this pawn becomes a target either right away or later. If I'm right, I should be able to develop solidly and take care of the weaknesses here with a c-pawn advance, or deal with f5 with this, or the threat of f5 with this aggressive move f4, which is double-edged for sure. Definitely a very double-edged move, and comes with its own inherent risk that my king is just only becoming more open. But it might be a way to try to justify the whole plan I've had so far, right? I mean, I did put the rook on e1. I'm trying to open up that file. So I think that c3 is a plan that's certainly worth worthwhile. I think that some waiting move probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I like the idea of b3 for its flexibility. Again, I'm curious what the plan is that black will choose. Maybe black doesn't want to go for h4. Maybe it feels overly committal. But tactically, I don't see any immediate consequences, so I don't feel like I'm blundering. And if there's a misevaluation later on about the line that involves f4, I'll probably just have to deal with it when we get there, right? Now, one last thing is, okay, if check while the e-file is blocked and then queen f2, is that a real problem? Well, not right away. I can just play tickle and say go back home, right? If takes and then knight takes, still doesn't seem like there's immediate problems to this move, so should be an interesting idea to run with. And again, if they play f5, we've got captures here, and okay, if they take with the pawn, there might even be other weird ideas at some point here. Maybe not though. Actually, that looks, the pawn take is kind of irritating, huh? Keeps my knight out of these squares. If I take and they take with the rook, we have established ourselves a mess, ladies and gentlemen. something messy this way comes. Something messy this way blows. I guess I could play g5. Worst case scenario. I mean, it does keep the rook out, but, you know, at bay, keeps it closed. And if they take it, I'm going to take with the knight and look for compensation. You know, now they could take here and give this check because I don't have bishop e3. But the position might still be interesting, whether I take there or take on f8. There's bishop f4 check, so I probably have to take there. And the position is still very interesting. So I think I'm going to go with b3. You know, we've spent a lot of time on it. I'm going to move over to the main analysis, the making move board, away from the analysis board, and I'm going to roll the dice. Drum roll, please. b3 is being played, and no hesitation. Make the move. What approach will be chosen by the world? Queenside pressure, rook to c8, knight b6, or knight c5, queen c7. Also, the bishop coming to a6 is an idea. Or the lines that I spent most of my time analyzing that I felt a little more worried about, of course, with this h4 pawn extension and the idea of f5. And it's possible that's so double-edged that the members may not feel inclined to go for that. They are opening their own king in the process. But time will tell. How much time? Well, 23 hours and 59 minutes to be exact, as far as how much time we have in this one. And eagerly await the world's decision. Good luck, everybody.